A couple of videos ago I talked about how we're going to go and get some battery storage. Well, the batteries are here, they're in, and they are absolutely fantastic. A few videos ago I mentioned that I would be getting battery storage, and we went through some of the options around the inverter and the batteries and the particular things that were going through my mind at the time leading up to putting battery storage in this house. Now, I wanted to get something that was going to cover the load in the house most of the time. I'm not expecting to cover all of the loads in the home, especially charging to electric cars. There's no way and there's no need to cover that consumption. What I was looking for was something that was going to really cover the general load inside the house, cooking, lighting, all of the kind of general stuff that you might have going on in the home on a normal day. And also strike a balance between the price and size of the system and also the expandability of the system. So we ended up going for a set of Pylontech modular batteries. So the Pylontech batteries are almost like a rack mount battery, look a bit like a rack mount piece of equipment. Not quite as deep as, say, like a server or something like that. If you're in the IT industry, you'll be familiar with those. But a modular unit, and the batteries could be bought in 2.4 kilowatt versions, 3.4 kilowatt versions, and a 5 kilowatt version. So depending on your budget and what you needed, you could essentially stack these batteries up and create a system the size that you want. Now, coupled to that is an inverter, which converts the DC voltage from the battery into AC voltage that can be supplied into the home. And for that, we went for a SoFar 3 kilowatt inverter. Now, this house has already got solar panels on it, and it was fitted at a time when battery storage technology really wasn't something that people were doing back in sort of 2016. Certainly, if they were doing it, it was very, very expensive. But battery technology, as we know, has moved on massively thanks to electric vehicles and all sorts of other things. And so prices have become a bit more affordable. It's still very expensive to do, but if you do it, then the impact that it has on your monthly energy bills is significant. The other thing that it will allow you to do is change your behaviour massively. And one of the things that is a consequence of us doing battery storage is that we have made a number of changes that will save us money, but also with a war going on in Europe, and Russia being a major supplier of gas into Europe, we can really stick it to Putin by reducing the amount of gas that we consume in the home, meaning that in England, for example, some other industries that need gas can be using that gas, or we can sell it into Europe and mess Putin up. So either way, getting the consumption of gas down in the home was also a priority for me personally, because of what's going on out there in the world. And if everyone did that, it would make a significant difference. It's actually mind-boggling to me that the government hasn't really got a war effort going on right now, and I think they are just starting to realise that they can't just afford to keep paying everyone £60 odd a month forever, because as far as I'm concerned, this war could go on for 10 years if Putin really wanted to. So that was another consideration that started to come into these calculations. And obviously the whole situation has become more cost effective because of the current war and the prices of energy that have resulted from that. So if it wasn't cost effective to do it before, it's certainly cost effective to do it now. So what happened was we had a 4.8 kilowatt hours of batteries installed with this inverter. The inverter is 3 kilowatts, which means that it can only charge at a rate of 3 kilowatts, and it can only discharge at a rate of 3 kilowatts. Now that's really important to remember, because if your house is generally consuming over 3 kilowatts, then you're going to be not satisfying the demand of the house from that inverter. And also, if you've got peak loads, maybe when you're doing cooking or a cup of tea or something like that, maybe even a powerful Hoover or hairdryer, or multiple loads all happening at the same time, then again the inverter isn't going to be able to satisfy the loads in the home. Now for me, what I have decided to do is to reduce the types of device in the home which can consume a huge amount of electricity. So some of these things are counterintuitive. So for example, there's a big argument that you can have with people about whether it's worth getting a boiling hot water tap instead of having a kettle. Now, if you have a boiling hot water tap, you're probably going to use more electricity over a period of time than if you have a kettle, especially if you don't use it very much. However, if you have a kettle, what you'll find is that the inverter can't supply enough power to actually, fully satisfy the demand of the kettle, or they're about the same. So any other loads going on in the home will tip you over the edge. Whereas if you have a boiling hot water tap, then actually it's just going on and off all of the time, but it's using very little, comparatively, about half what a kettle would use. So actually you can satisfy that demand completely from a battery storage system with a modest size inverter. Can get a bigger inverter if you want to. You can get a 5,000, a 5 kilowatt inverter, but they cost an absolute fortune. So it really just depends on your budget. So I've got a couple of graphs of what we've done, and I'll explain some of the other things that we've done as well. So the first picture is just a screenshot of how the house used to look. So stuff goes on the night. You can see the hot water tap coming on and off because that's the little bumps. Sun comes up, export, and then sun goes down, and then we use some power again. Now, since we've had the batteries, the graph has changed dramatically. So now it looks a lot like this. So you have a battery being charged overnight, which is when we have the cheap electricity on Octopus Go, and then there's another spike at just before the electricity goes back onto the more expensive rate. So I've got the Octopus Go 5 hours, so I go from midnight to 5:30 in the morning. Now that spike there is our eddy unit, so that's the hot water immersion heater diverter. Now this is the first time we've run the eddy to heat hot water, not to save money but to reduce our use on gas. Now it also happens that our overnight rate probably means it is actually cheaper to do this as well, but that's not the primary reason. The primary reason is to stick it to Putin, use less gas, because if we heat for an hour in our immersion heater, it means our boiler doesn't have to come on as much to heat the hot water in our hot water tank. The other thing that you won't see from the graph here is the fact that we've also completely turned off our hob, our cooker. So we normally have a gas hob, 5-ring gas hob in the kitchen. We've bought an induction hob. Now we haven't gone out and bought a swanky induction hob because that would mean a total kitchen disaster. We'd have to rip all the worktops out and recut the holes and fit probably a bigger supply into the kitchen. So for just now, because I don't want to do that right now, we've bought a temporary portable induction hob, which again means we can cook off of electric, and that electric is being bought overnight when it's cheap. And the current rate I get, I think, is 8.25p per kilowatt hour. So these batteries basically mean that from a cost perspective, I've almost halved my electricity bill from what it would have been on my last tariff. So I was paying 14p-ish, I think 14.5p per kilowatt hour on my old tariff. I'm now paying 8.25p per kilowatt hour. Oh, and overnight, my old tariff overnight was 5p per kilowatt hour. Now I'm paying 8.25p, but I'm now paying 8.25p for pretty much all my electricity. I'm not buying huge quantities of electricity. I don't have a base load during the day. All of the base load, which is about 400 or 500 watts, is covered by the batteries. Now, the keen-eyed of you will see at the very end of this particular graph, the base load of the house creeps up. It's about 11:30, something like that, where it does that. We've run out of power, so the batteries are dead. So that's why the base load has crept back in there. Now, when I bought the batteries, I bought modular Pylontech batteries because I knew that at some point through the year, so we've had them since September, it's now November, that the solar would start to tail off, and therefore we would rely more and more and more on the batteries. And that's exactly what's happened. However, I was so impressed by what's happened with this, that I bit the bullet and I bought 4 Pylontech 3.4 kilowatt hour battery units, which means we've got now around 14 kilowatt hours of batteries. And that's pretty much it. I don't intend to get any more. One, because we've run out of space. And 2, that's about as much as I can get overnight if I was to empty the batteries during the day and have to fill them completely up just on the cheap tariff. That's about as much as I can get into them with a 3 kilowatt inverter, because it's 3 kilowatts times 5 hours, and that's your lot basically. I'd have to get a bigger inverter in order to justify getting more batteries or have a longer, cheaper period. So that is what we've done. I've been super impressed with how this technology has gone on. It has been a bit of a tricky thing to find, and cost-wise, installation of my house was a nightmare. So costs being, the batteries about £7,000, the inverter about £1,000, wiring sockets, not sockets, what I'm talking about, all the sort of sundry pieces will vary depending on what your house is like, where your fuse boards are, all this kind of stuff. So £8,000 for the bits and maybe odds and ends, and then whatever it's going to cost to fit it. Now, I actually earlier in the year put a cutout into my understairs cupboard so that we could install the batteries in the understairs cupboard. I didn't want to install them outside because my garage isn't very suitable. It's very messy, dusty, and cold. Batteries don't like varying temperatures. So the understairs cupboard works well for that, although we have had to ventilate that cupboard a little bit more because the inverter obviously does generate a little bit of heat when it's doing its thing. Now, I actually used my pocket meter, which is a great little Kickstarter, or was a great little Kickstarter a little while ago, because it has a data logger to log the temperature in there. And we found that the temperature crept up to about 40 degrees, which seems quite hot. But these inverters are designed to go up to a lot more than that, although they will reduce their performance if the heat does get above 45 degrees. So it gets hot in there, but the ventilation is working well enough to keep it within its design limits. Obviously, the cooler we can get it, the longer the inverter will last. The really cool thing about this is we've made a massive difference to the amount of gas that we're using, and so it feels like we're sticking it to Putin a little bit, and we've made a huge difference to the amount of money that we are paying out in electricity. In fact, with the changes that we've made here, we have made a massive dent in the cost of our electricity. The Octopus Go tariff has about 40p per kilowatt hour during the day, so we really don't want to use that because that is a horrendous amount of money. We do have the solar chipping in, but that's obviously with the weather coming in and the nights getting longer, we're not getting as much of that anymore. So being able to buy the cheaper rate and store it and then use it all throughout the day has been, a revelation really. And this is maybe one of the things I feel slightly less comfortable about, is that I've been able to do this because I have a very flexible friend in my credit card. But the thing that annoys me about this is that everyone should be encouraged to do this. The government should be encouraging people to do this. They should be getting behind companies like Britishvolt to build batteries en masse, because when the Second World War started, there wasn't people kind of hanging around going, oh wow, brilliant, now we've got something to do with all these Spitfires, Hurricanes, Lancasters and Wellington bombers. They had to build the factories, or they had to repurpose factories for a war effort. We're at war. There should be a war effort going on right now. And I think the government are just starting to come around to that concept. So that's the thing that annoys me, is that I've had to kind of spend my own money to do this. I'm not worried about spending my own money. I obviously want to do this. I don't have to do this. But for those who aren't in that luxurious position of being able to do this, then they're just faced with no option but to pay absolutely huge amounts of money out a month on energy, and especially if they have a petrol or diesel power car as well, all of those prices are going up as well. So to really insulate yourself from these financial shocks, owning an electric car, having solar panels, having a well insulated home, and having battery storage at home is definitely the way to go. And I hope people are encouraged to do some of those things through grants and incentives. Certainly when I insulated my home, we had a grant that covered that, which was subsequently scrapped by a government, and now we find ourselves in need of homes being more well insulated because we need to cut down on the amount of gas that is used in the country, which is a real lack of foresight by previous governments, which is very, very annoying. So hopefully the government will realise, and I think there has been some announcements, so hopefully there'll be some insulation schemes and things like that. One thing though I will just mention is, have a look around your home and just see what's going on, because the batteries that I had, which I swapped out for the larger batteries, they went to my parents' house, and they don't use a lot of electricity, just the two of them, but they had 1,000 watts of lighting in their living room. 1,000 watts of lighting in their living room. One of their lamps was 300 watts, and they had incandescent bulbs all over the place, and we spent a couple of £100 replacing those for LED in order for the batteries to actually have a fighting chance of lasting a decent amount of time. So you do have to go through your home a little bit to make it possible for these really advanced batteries to power a home, because ultimately the only reason it's possible to power our homes off batteries these days isn't just because the battery technology has gotten better, it's because the technology in our home to light and power our homes has become more and more and more efficient over time, and therefore requires less electricity in the first place. So you might take it for granted that you have LED bulbs, but actually there might be something lurking around there that has a gigantic bulb, like a security light outdoors. Those things, classic 150, 200 watt elements in those things, like big halogen things. So, you know, have a quick look around just to make sure you haven't got something that's really going to burn through that battery storage energy. So we've had a fantastic time with these batteries. I thoroughly recommend them. I hope that the government gets behind schemes to help people insulate their homes and buy battery storage and fit solar to their homes. Although at energy prices the way they are, I'm sure it actually makes sense for a lot of people to get out there and do it for themselves. Certainly when I was trying to buy these batteries and these inverters, there was a lot of demand for them. There was a lot of supply coming through, but you did have to wait a month or two before you would be able to get hold of some of this stuff. So anyway, let me know, what are you doing? What have you changed about your behaviour because of this energy crisis? Have you invested in batteries and solar and electric vehicles and all this kind of stuff? It's definitely going to make a dent in your monthly outgoings, but it is also going to need a massive upfront investment from people in order to do this. Anyway, this is a very active thing right now. This is what we've done here in this home, and it's made a big difference. Let me know what you're doing in the comments below. Don't forget to like it, share, subscribe, all that jazz, and we'll see you in the next one.